Time to look back at the week that was in retrospect. Now, the celebrations of the Springboks' historic fourth World Cup victory. They continue around the country. As you've just seen moments ago, they are in Cape Town today. The team, and tomorrow they will be in Durban parading the Webb Ellis Trophy. Despite the country's many challenges, though, the Boks, that triumphant victory in France, has managed to rally the nation together in celebration. Joining me now are two veteran journalists, Tim Modise and Zugile Machola, who are going to reflect about this great moment, the lovely scenes we have been observing on the streets of South Africa. Pratim and Mr. Machola, thank you very much for your time. Pratim, let's start with you.
Sure.
When you watch what is going on South Africa's streets today, does it bring back any memories for you?
Well, Coley, thank you, firstly, for inviting me to be with you here in the studio. As the country celebrates something that is very, very positive, and it's interesting that at the same time the President just spoke about AGOA and economic growth and development. Yeah, it does, because, just before 1994, as a start, we were very apprehensive, not knowing what kind of South Africa we were trying to put together at that time, I mean, politically, but also as a journalist at the time, looking at the mood in the country. And it was reflected in what happened when people went out in large numbers to go and participate in voting for their preferred representatives.
Yeah.
And for many, it was for the first time. Others were on the last legs of their lives. They were elderly people. But it culminated within a short period of time, 24 months, I think. Within 24 months, South Africa winning the World Cup after returning to international competition, the Rugby World Cup '95, and the Africa Cup of Nations in 1996.
Yeah.
The mood was that of optimism at the time. We were very, very, very hopeful, as much as people did not have much by way of material possessions and so on. But the hope was substantially bigger than what we were exposed to at the time.
Yeah.
So, looking at what has happened now, this past month and this past weekend, it reminds me of that time, the mood of optimism despite the challenges that we are going through. And on top of that, the individuals who've played a significant role in making sure that at least we get to feel good about ourselves through the efforts of those individuals.
Zugile Machola, let's bring you into the conversation. And Pratim, you're welcome to look at Zugile as well on the screen there. Tim Modise talks about the mood of optimism despite the challenges that we face as a country. That's something that Siya Kolisi, the Bok captain, has pointed out, and the president of the country, Cyril Ramaphosa, adding on to that these celebrations do not in any way mask the difficulties that we face in this country. Your view of how these celebrations have or encapsulate what we feel as a country?
Polly, I think we're talking the language of 30 years ago. I keep hearing people talking about unity, how this is going to help us achieve unity. We should be talking about inspiration. I mean, this unity, that was 1994. I mean, 4 trophies later, if anything, this is inspiring. We're a country that is going through a very difficult time, especially for young people, Polly. If you are young and you've gone to school, you are now a graduate. Anybody who has studied and graduated in anything knows how difficult it is to actually get a degree, and then to be let down by your country in the sense that you don't get a job. And there's no chance, there's just nothing that tells you that you are going to get a job anytime soon. We're talking, not just talking a few people here, we're talking hundreds of thousands, Tony, whose futures are just being destroyed right in front of our eyes. If anything, this should be a message of inspiration to them. What we're looking at right now, it's quite choreographed. It's politicized. You can tell that we're in the silly season of elections. Where everything is almost peppered with politics. We don't need politics in this kind of celebration.
Pratim, I wonder to what extent do you agree that what is going on South Africa's streets is choreographed, but while you give thought to what Zugile has just said, you earlier touched on the individuals that are responsible for what Zugile refers to as inspiration, I suppose, versus unity. And I have in mind the video that you retweeted this week. Rassie Erasmus, a very emotional Rassie Erasmus, entering the airport terminal. And I seem to remember the words that he used, that he has lost friends in the lead up to the 2019 World Cup when he decided that he was going to appoint Sia as captain. Do you think that people like him deserve a special mention, deserve a special place in what we are feeling as a country?
Absolutely. And, you know, I did make comments in that regard, because we sometimes think that it's only politicians who are going to make individual South Africans grow and be inspired, as Zuki said. But it is actually individuals within society, in business, in the arts, in sport, everywhere, who make a difference in terms of inspiring, particularly young people, to also dream big, to also go out there and achieve stuff, you know, because when you are caught up in the bigger problems which are there, you may be so demoralized, you may think you do not count for anything. I'm reminded of my own youth days, or childhood days, of Muhammad Ali, for instance, when he was out there in the world, right? And we were living in the years of apartheid. And here was a black man going out in the world and saying what he was saying, and winning his fights. And I was so awestruck, because I was not aware that it is possible for a black individual to get to the top. And there he was. I mean, he was a global phenomenon at that time, and doing exceptionally well. And here's the interesting thing. He was helped to get to the top by his trainer, Angelo Dundee, who happened to be white, and was actually somebody that we did not hear much about unless you followed the sport. Now, I come to this period and the comments I made about Rassie Erasmus specifically, that for a man, an individual who belongs to another community in the South African context, to go out of his way to help develop a young black South African, get him to be at the top of the sport, make him the captain. He's now the public spokesman of the Springboks. He's promoting a good message. He's an achiever by any stretch of imagination. But it is thanks to the leadership, inspiration, and involvement, from my point of view, of a person like Rassie Erasmus, you know, who demonstrates these three qualities that I would like to share, and we can continue with the conversation, was, you know, that capabilities, or the quality of the quality of an individual is in his competency, which is what? We can call it meritocracy, if you will. And number two, the values of the individual, going ahead despite what his friends and others were saying, to appoint Siya Kolisi as captain. That says a lot about the man's value system. On top of it all, it also says a lot about his attitude in terms of drilling the winning spirit within the team itself, making it work together. And of course, you know, I think Jacques Ninaba deserves a mention here. But I would still single out Rassie Erasmus and say he deserves all the accolades we can give him.
Much along that theme, Zugile Machoni, let me come to you, because Pratim mentions at the start of his second response that gone are those days when South Africans looked to politicians for inspiration. And I'm going to be specific about it, because it is the very same Springboks, when they won in 1995, that Madiba lifted that trophy aloft alongside Francois Pienaar. Those moments are gone, and you this week have written about ANC politicians who want to claim the hard work of others. Why did you choose to write an article like that?
You know, Polly, what I can tell you about Nelson Mandela is that he was a big man. He was an ordinary man. He had an ability to make very small people seem very big. You know, I remember the first time I met him, but anybody would tell you a story about the first time they met Nelson Mandela. He just had that amazing thing about him. You couldn't script him. You know, that's why when you look at the 1995 moment, you can tell it really was a Madiba moment. It's not a moment that you can easily remake, you know, with someone else. You know, I was quite embarrassed yesterday when I heard the president saying that his staff was telling him to memorize the names of the players. You know, and you begin to see that, oh no, this is not it. You know, to say, let's remake the Mandela moment. Even on the day when we were lifting the trophy,
is that what you? I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Zugile. Is that what you are pointing out or referring to when you say this moment, what we are seeing on South Africa's streets, at least on the part of politicians, it seems choreographed?
Exactly, Tony. Like I'm saying, that night you could see the president. He was ready. You know, Sia lifted the trophy, and he was there already. He took the trophy as well. You can see that this is a political build-up to something. You know, yesterday I was quite disturbed because I'm a fan of rugby, but also the impact that it has on society. I know how it works. You know, when the Springboks arrived, almost at sundown in Soweto, people had been lining the streets for hours. Where were the Springboks? They were being held by politicians. You know, that's why I'm saying we need to try and depoliticize sport. But also, when you look at social media, I was disturbed by the thread that ended up involving the secretary of the ANC. He claimed that he ended sport quotas, etc. The context of it, Polly. Read the room. This is not the right time to be making those statements, even if you are correct. You know, sometimes people tend to think that if you are correct, then it's everything. Being correct is not everything. Read the room. It tells stories in the correct context, and this was the wrong context.
Tim?
Yeah, well, I will go along with what Zuge is saying, because at the end of the day, it does not take long once you move into the political space to divide the people, as is typical in modern times in South Africa. When we have challenges that require the unity of purpose, you know, that let's acknowledge what the bigger challenges are of society, mobilize along the lines of the priorities, and use this moment of success as an inspiration for mobilization. You know, and say, if the Springboks can do this, we can do it in the area of economic growth. We can do it in the area of dealing with crime and lawlessness. We can do it if we deal with corruption head on, the same way that the scrummers or what do they call them? The bomb squad of the Springboks did. You know, use those attitudes and say, we'll have a bomb squad against corruption, against crime. We'll also have a bomb squad that takes the economy to another level.
But Tim, I do think that South Africans, ordinary South Africans, the very people who are not prompted by anyone to line the streets of South Africa because of the inspiration that Zugile speaks about. I do think that perhaps there's a failure to read the room, as Zugile says. Because when you watched yesterday at FNB, there is the mayor of Johannesburg attempting to address the crowd, and the people simply were not interested in that. In fact, some of them started leaving exactly at that moment.
Sure.
What is it that the politicians are failing to read about this moment?
Well, I mean, over time, in recent years in particular, people have read what they've read. Every day we are reminded of what is wrong in the country, and the people who are caught in the act of doing wrong, unfortunately, majority of the times, are politicians who generally are regarded as leaders of the country. Now, if people choose to lead by bad example, you know, and you know that that bad example is undermining your interests as an individual citizen, you will look for leaders anywhere else who give you hope and inspiration, as the Springboks have done. And that is where we are. I mean, you have issues in your personal life. Zugile has mentioned many young people who are without jobs now, right? What else must they look for if those who are in charge are not making it their business to make sure that things work so that they can also have access to the opportunities that this economy has got all the capacity in the world to deliver? We know this.
Gentlemen, we're tapering down on this conversation, and I'd like to frame this, and I hope I have the ability to do it. So we have a celebration that is ongoing in the country, but at the same time, we have a war that is ongoing in the Middle East. We have a war that's ongoing in Russia versus Ukraine. But can I focus the attention on what is going on in the Middle East? Because our colleagues there are also in the thick of it. When I say in the thick of it, they're literally dying. Journalists are being targeted in the Middle East. And I'm raising this primarily on the back of what is going on in Johannesburg as well, the AGOA Summit. And who is the sponsor of the AGOA Summit? It is the United States.
Sure.
The United States, which is giving arms to Israel and the bombardments that are ongoing in Gaza. Gentlemen, I want us for a moment to just have a look at a video of fellow journalists. So it's a journalist on air, much like me, but talking to a colleague in the streets of Gaza who are reporting about this situation. And I'll try to give context once the video is done. Let's just have a look at that for a moment.
نستطيع أن نحتمل لقد أنهكنا إننا هنا ضحايا شهداء مع فرق التوقيت فقط نحن نمضي واحدا تلو الآخر ولا أحد ينظر إلينا ولا إلى حجم الكارثة والجريمة التي نعيشها في غزة لا حماية دولية على الإطلاق ولا حصانة لأي شيء لا تحمينا هذه الدروع ولا تحمينا هذه القبعات إنها مجرد شعارات نرتديها فقط هي لا تحمي أي صحفي على الإطلاق لا تحمينا هذه الدروع ولا هذه ما نرتديها فقط هي الشعارات فقط نحن هنا ضحايا على الهواء مباشرة نفقد الأرواح واحدا تلو الآخر بلا أي ثمن نمضي شهداء فقط مع فرق التوقيت نحن ننتظر الدور واحدا تلو الآخر زميلنا محمد أبو حطب كان هنا منذ نصف ساعة فقط وغادرنا الآن هو وزوجته وابنه وأخيه وكثير من عائلته هم ضحايا هنا في داخل المستشفى.
I hope I'm going to have the capacity to explain very briefly what went on there. But Tim, these are two journalists talking about a fellow journalist whose house was bombed. Moments ago, they saying that he was doing exactly what they are doing, reporting on this ongoing war, and now he lies in the same hospital, dead, alongside family members. And I just want to quickly quote one sentence from the one that is reporting on TV, the one that is removing the protective gear, because he says, "We are victims awaiting our turn to be killed." But Tim, you've had your moment. Let's just quickly give Zugile a turn. Zugile, what is it that we can say as fellow journalists to what's going on in the Middle East? In South Africa here, you have the Democratic Alliance that's just booted a fellow member from a shadow cabinet because they expressed a view that what is going on in Gaza is genocide by Israel.
These are very difficult times, Colin. Really, these are very difficult times. In 2023, Colin, in the world, across the world, you should not be having wars. I mean, there are modern ways of resolving these issues, Colin. We are a people who believe in resolving conflict through dialogue. It's not just an ANC policy or a South African government policy. You know, if you look at what happened over the years with many tribes relocating to the Eastern Cape, to Xhosaland and settling there, you can tell that negotiating, resolving conflict through dialogue has always been our issue, our strategy, Colin. This is really disturbing. I really have no words to have journalists who find themselves in the crossfire like this, Colin. Even if it was happening in our case, in South Africa, we had a war like this, we would report it. It's our job. You know, journalists in South Africa reported the very world, the ANC, IFP wars, they were in the crossfire. So we would be in a similar situation. At the end of the day, Polly, there will have to be dialogue to end this situation. There's no other way.
Let me stop you there. We're out of time. Bratim, very briefly.
Sure. Very briefly, I think the cruelty that we see happening in Gaza has got to be condemned by anybody who cares about human rights and so on, even beyond the journalists. It's very sad that this is what has been happening to journalists, but what about the children on top of that? You know, I've seen images of children who are left without parents now, family members, some of these children as young as 6 or 7 years old. Now, you know, it could be that there was what the Israelis may call provocation, but the reprisals do not equate what happened before. And if you are a civilized people, as the government there claims to be, you don't have to reduce yourself to this level of barbarism and cruelty against those that you are opposed to. So, my view, you know, any means must be found to get to a point of ceasefire. The cruelty has been more than enough now.
Thank you very much for those words. Veteran journalist Tim Modise and Zugila Majola talking to us, wrapping the week that was.